So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and actually a battle replay that I've already commentated on once, but thanks to Nvidia's laughable levels of incompetence, I'm having to do it again because it wouldn't let me close down the recording last time because every time they do an update they always manage to screw something up royally. Regardless, we are going to be doing this replay again. Fortunately for me at least, this is an enjoyable battle, so I don't mind too much the fact that we're going to be doing it again. We can see that we are on the Arthedain outpost today, and this is a pretty decent settlement. It's pretty open inside, but there are some good defensive positions around the outside. And today, while there may be a statue of Sauron still adorning the central courtyard, the sister kingdoms of Arthedain and Gondor have joined up with the Sylvan Elves of Merkwood and Lothlorien to capture this settlement, and Sauron, not wanting to stand for this, is going to send forth a legion of 4 Orcish armies, or at least command them to try and retake this settlement for the forces of evil. Interesting mix of factions as well. 2 Númenorian inheritor factions will be good if the going gets a little bit more attrition-y, shall we say, a little bit more grindy. They'll be good with their armour and their defensive values and their phalanxes. Meanwhile, they're going to be backed up by the Sylvan Elves, who, perhaps even more so than the High Elves, are all about dealing that damage out quickly. Whereas both Lindon and Imladris tend to be able to keep themselves alive, albeit in different ways. Lindon, of course, with their low armour, a little bit of a different proposition, but still, Lorien and Mirkwood are definitely all about that damage, especially at range. But to start with, we'll be going through the 4 Orcish armies, starting off with Tweak over here, who's playing as Isengard. Definitely the most consistent in terms of quality among all of the orcs. They definitely have a very solid mid-tier, and a big part of that is the Urukai crossbowmen. Crossbows with their stopping power are almost a given, really, that you're going to face them as if you're facing off against Isengard, I should say. It's unlikely that you're not going to see them. There are a few instances maybe where you wouldn't want to bring them, but in a siege, all the time, you always want to bring them, whether you're on the defence or the attack. On the attack here, where Isengard often are, to be fair, if the enemy dig in too much and you get clear shots on them, the crossbows can be absolutely brutal. So definitely a good pick there from Tweak, but also important, I think, to mix in some of these Urukai archers, because while Isengard are not exactly known for their archer prowess in Reforged, the Urukai archers are still good in the same way that any other standard orc archer is going to be. They're not overly expensive, and the enemy will have to deal with them somehow, otherwise even cheap archers like this can rack up a decent kill count for themselves. So whether that be getting the enemy infantry out of position as they come forward to try and engage the archers, or whether that's wasting a bit of the defending ammunition on just basic units of archers like this as opposed to some of your more important units, that's worthwhile. I think there's another unit of Urukai archers hidden in here somewhere. There's definitely some Snaga stalkers, or Snaga skirmishers I should say, that we aren't seeing, because of course I have seen this battle before, so I know what Isengard have got hidden, and they do have some Snaga around here somewhere. Naturally, they also have some Urukai pikemen. Very good standard line pikes. I say standard, they're probably slightly above standard, to be honest with you. Their armour is very nice as well, so if they do come under arrow fire, they will be a little bit more resistant to that sort of thing, albeit they are still going to take heavy losses if they do come under arrow fire, so do bear that in mind. But the armour does make it so they won't get absolutely shredded, at least. But the good thing about them is you can bring them in high numbers. You can bring 3 of them before the cost increases, which is more than pikes of this cost will normally allow. Normally it's only the 2, so Isengard can blanket the line with pikes more easily, and good quality pikes as well. So if the going gets tough in the late game and they still have pikes available to them, that could be the difference maker, to be fair. Urukai Reavers, again, I agree with this pick from Tweak as well, because while they are quite fragile, certainly to arrow fire, because they've only got sort of light leather armour and they are unshielded, the armour piercing will be useful against the 2 Númenorian inheritor factions today. So yeah, definitely a good pick, I think. Urukai infantry as well, they offer much more rigidity on the front line than the Urukai raiders do, albeit they're obviously more expensive, and there are slightly fewer of them per unit, but honestly not too much less. And they can outperform standard Western line infantry as well. So Gondor infantry and Arthedain men-at-arms, even with the armour upgrades, I apologise about the dog, even with the armour upgrades, the Urukai infantry will still beat them, albeit it will be quite a slow process, I would imagine. So there is that as well. Urukai Berserkers, another good choice for the same reason as the Urukai Reavers, albeit to a higher standard, of course. Much more damage, more survivable because of their 3 hit points, but don't let the 3 HP fool you. They're not on the level of something like the Varazim Swordmasters, because their melee defense and their armor values are very low. Armor, in fact, is non-existent. So once their hit points are gone, they will die in droves. They're very much a flash in the pan type of unit. Back here we can see Isengard's tankiest unit in the Guards of Orthanc, the Men of Dunlin, that Saruman trusts to be his personal bodyguard more so than the rampant, bestial Urukai. Very, very tough as well. The best armour that Isengard can forge. Of course, they are spears, so even spear bodyguards like this, they don't tend to be the most damaging units, but they can withstand an awful lot of punishment. Put them in the middle of the line, and Isengard can be an excellent slow-pushing faction, along with their pikes and infantry. We've got the Trolls of the White Hand as well. Trolls of the White Hand, you wouldn't think it to look at them really, but Trolls are actually a unit that does require quite a bit of finesse to actually use properly. They can do an awful lot of damage very, very quickly to the right kind of unit, but that also goes double for them because there are only so few of them. High damage infantry can do a lot of damage to them quite quickly, so you do need to push them in at the right time, against the right targets, and with support. If you can do all of those things, Trolls will definitely not steer you wrong, but if you fail to do that, you could find yourself in a bit of trouble. Got the terrifying Nazkai, possibly the best unit of armour-piercing shock infantry bodyguard that there is in the game. Stuff like the Witch Realm Hammer Guard, Enslavers, Tharbad Warhammers, Dalian Paladins, all of those would be their competition. I can't think of one off the top of my head that I would back to win a straight-up fight against the Nazkai, the Folk of the Ring. Very, very deadly, of course. There is actually Lert's Hunting Pack around here as well, I think. Not the General's Bodyguard today, though, so I think that is the Nazkai. More infantry back here and more pikes, so that will round off his army. Fairly standard fare for Isengard, based heavily on the trifecta of infantry, pikes and crossbows as they usually are, and dipping more so into the tier above that as well than the tier below that, so going for a bit more quality perhaps than numbers, but for Isengard I think that's a little bit more understandable. We have the Mordor army that's on the field today under the command of Eastern Breeze. He's got some orc fodder on the front line, of course. Very, very cheap. He's brought a couple of units of them at least, possibly, just 3 actually, 3 units of orc fodder. Very cheap even to bring that many of them. Obviously that's a lot of orcs on the field. They're not going to do much in melee, but they can get in the way. They can get in the way of arrow fire, they can get in the way of cavalry charges, all of that sort of thing. They're obviously not going to win you any fights, but they will facilitate your more important units to do well. Speaking of which, got some Nazgul here on the front. As long as you put them in and amongst more numerous units, they can be an absolute nightmare to get rid of because of their super high stats and a lot of HP, of course, but there are only 12 of them, so do bear that in mind. Uruk Captains, the armour-piercing line infantry bodyguard that Mordor can field, the cheapest of all their bodyguard units, and of course the least impressive. But even so, they are still armour-piercing, so that's still going to be useful, and they are shielded as well, the only Mordor bodyguard to come with a shield actually, so that will be useful against the Sylvan Elves as well. Troll Drummers to keep all the lower orcs in line. Got some Temple Executioners. I actually prefer the standard model for them instead of the upgraded model. It's one of those rare occasions where I do, mainly because I quite like the helm, which they got from the design of which they got from Shadow of War, I think. One of the things that I do quite like about the aesthetic of that game. Temple Executioners, though, one of the units which even the elves will have to be quite careful of. We shall see if these Black Númenóreans can reclaim what would be a settlement in their image. Yep, more fodder. Orc Archers, so he's gone for the cheap archer route as well, which is definitely the right thing to do, because Mordor are not going to be able to out-skirmish Merkwood or Lothlorien or any of the factions on the defence today, actually. He's also got some Arthedain shadow bows in here as well, to be fair, as well as some temple guards. So he does have his higher quality archers, but they should be held back until the late game. Orc Javelins, another good pick, very cheap, but really easy to pay for themselves. All it takes is a few volleys and you've already paid for them, really, and they can absorb punishment as well. Really, no matter what you do, you can't really go too far wrong with the Orc Javelins. A couple of units of them. Olaghai, very similar to the Trolls of the White Hand, albeit they don't have shields, but they are more impressive in dealing damage in melee, which is what you want from the Trolls at the end of the day. So I can see why they were brought. Morannon Halberds and Saurons were also an armour-piercing phalanx and an armour-piercing shock infantry unit, the slightly higher tier variant of that. All of this AP is not going to be too useful against the Sylvan Elves, but it's still worthwhile to bring, because if you do find yourself going toe-to-toe with a Gondor, for example, it can be priceless. And back here we have some Melkor's Chosen. In the case of a sally out, the Melkor's Chosen will be on hand, but also later on in the battle, potentially we could see the Melkor's Chosen get into the more open spaces within the outpost itself. Then, moving on, we have Proxima Centauri, who is playing as one of 2 Angmar armies today. Got some Witch Realm pikemen on the front. Again, they're actually very similar to the Urukai pikemen that we've already talked about, but like I said, Isengard can bring 3 before the price increase. Angmar can only bring 2 of the Witch Realm pikemen, but still, if the going gets tough in the late game, the same applies to them. A phalanx can really be worth its weight in gold. A couple of units of Gundabad Guard, so heavy spears. Again, Angmar really has quite a lot of survivable heavy units in their mid to high tier, and the Gundabad Guard are one of them. Another one, of course, is the Guardians of Khârn Dûm. I always sing the praises of this unit because it's not overly expensive, quite similar in price actually to the Urukai infantry, but where I prefer the Urukai pikes to the Witch Realm pikes, I actually prefer the Guardians of Khârn Dûm to the Urukai infantry because they go more in for their survivability. Bigger shields, that thick armour as well. They're not going to be as good at dealing damage, but line infantry you don't necessarily expect to deal all that damage. You want a unit like this to really be the staying power in your army, especially in a situation like this where you know you're going to come under heavy arrow fire. Blackwatch Legion as well, fantastic for pushing through the line. Mordor didn't bring their Black Guard of Barad-dûr today, so the Blackwatch Legion will be the only unit capable of doing that. Witch Realm Scourge Raiders, nice axe throwers, phalanx busters that they are, should be useful as well. We've got some Angmar Marauders, we've got the devastating Witches of course. We shall see if their foul sorcery comes into play today or whether they'll be shredded by the Sylvan Elf and Dunedain Archers. I think there's Orc Fellas in here as well in both the Angmar armies, but of course they can hide. And then both types of trolls, the Trolls of Angmar and of Gundabad. And finally, in this valley over here, we have Nabest, who has got 4 units actually of the Angmar Marauders, so going a little bit more numbers heavy than Proxima Centauri, which could be interesting because he's obviously going to be on his own, so he needs to be able to support his army by himself basically, which does mean he needs more numbers, so I actually do agree with that pick. 3 units of Guardians of Khârn Dûm, 2 units of the Witch Realm Pikemen, so similar units all round. Witch Realm Scourge Raiders, I don't think we saw them in the last army, but you can see the Witches are there, but also the Black Guard and the Hammer Guard are both here as well. Trolls of Gundabad, we've got some Gundabad Guard and some Blackwatch Legion as well, so a slightly more numerous army, but for the most part quite similar to his Angmar brethren. Then the first of the defenders, we have Demon's Hunter, who is playing as Gondor. Interesting to see some Gondor militia infantry, so trying to pad out their line of course. In a 4v4 siege, the defenders individually are going to have lower quality armies than the attackers. So it does make sense actually to bulk out your army a little bit with units such as this. They will be able to go toe to toe with stuff like Angmar Marauders, outright defeat Orc fodder. But as soon as they come up against something like Guardians of Khârn Dûm, they will struggle, and it'll be all about the numbers. Excuse me. Gondor infantry are varying upgrades. So you can see in there we've got the standard upgrade with just the pauldrons, the full upgrade with the full plate as well. So both variants. I think we've got the Axeman of Lasarnak here with 1 level of armour upgrade as well. Gondor doesn't have much in the way of really aggressive units, but the Axeman of Lasarnak can fill that role very nicely with the AP that comes along with it. Gondor Spearmen, there's Citadel Guard in there as well, which is a more defensive AP unit of course, because they're spears, as of course are the Fountain Guard, who are brilliant in a situation like this as long as they don't get focused. There's Pelargir Marines in there, and the only archers they actually have are a unit of Gondor Militia Archers, or 2 units of them actually. So Gondor's going to be relying on others to do their skirmishing for them on this occasion, which is quite rare to see. Gondor usually invests quite heavily in their archers, but not on this occasion. I think a bit of collaboration went on between the defenders to pick their comps, which is good to see. Ravenhelms of Caer Andros and some Lothian Honour Guard as well, the best of the Gondorian generals' bodyguards. We then have Baconfish 302. It's been a while since we've seen Baconfish actually, so good to see him around again, who is playing as Lothlorien. He's got the Riders of the Golden Wood, mighty horse archers that wield their Silverthorn bows and arrows. Caros Galadon's Guardians, arguably the best pike unit in the game. I would argue that that is now the First Legion pikes because of the AP that they bring to the table, but still the multiple HP nature of the Caros Galadon's Guardians does mean that you can have that debate. Several units of Blades of the Wood. Again, you need to cut corners somewhere in an army like this when, it's a 4v4 siege and you're on the defence. And the Blades of the Wood with their melee defence and damage should still be pretty good, honestly, at dealing with a lot of enemy units. But obviously lighter armour than the other Lothlorien units. Upgraded Kindred of Celeborn with their split shots. Very, very nice. He doesn't actually have rangers, I don't believe, Baconfish. So he hasn't elected to go for the Caer Amroth Sentinels. But the Kindred of Celeborn with their split shots can perform a similar role, not exactly the same, but similar. Lorien Archers as well, Lorinand Archers I should say, so heavier Lorien Skirmishers, and then a lot of axes. Lorinand Axemen, Lorinand Warriors, and Lorinand Swordmasters as well, so a lot of aggressive infantry that he can use here that's capable of really dishing out the damage against his foe. Then, moving on to Merkwood. A few of their units are hidden, but we'll go through the ones that we can actually see. A couple of units are Hiri Peng, so again the heavier Mirkwood Archer. They're not quite as heavily armoured as the Lorinand Archers, but it's much of a muchness really. They will perform the same role. Elders of the Elven King, which is where Thranduil's going to be, so yet more Silverthorn arrows to knock over the enemy on the approach. A couple of units of Woodland Protectors, so spears, but first and foremost they're going to be javelins on this occasion because there's only 1 mounted unit on the opposing team, so their javelins will be the most important thing. There's a few hidden units as well, Greenwood Rangers in there you can see, Woodland Realm Patrol, I think there's Wardens of Amon Lank on one side as well. That's all the hidden units anyway. And then we've got 4 units actually of the Blades of Amenduir, so another example of having to save a bit of money, but once again, while they may be very lightly armoured, pretty fragile to ranged fire, especially when you can circumvent that shield value of theirs. When it comes to being in melee, they will beat the brakes off lower quality orcs, and they'll even stand reasonably well against sort of the mid to upper tier of evil units as well. It can be a little bit sketchy if you try and face alone with them, but they can definitely make a part of a combined arms front line very effectively there. A couple of units of Bows of Amenduir as well, so they need to be really careful, to be honest, like the Rise of the Golden Wood, about the Melkor's Chosen. The Bows of Amenduir are much more fragile as well. They're single HP, very lightly armoured, easily zoned out by enemy archers, but glass cannons that they are very damaging for horse archers as well, especially at this cost. It's a high risk, high reward sort of unit, I think, but, you know, harassment units such as cavalry archers like this can be quite hard to use if they're fragile. That's where Can's horse archers come in with numbers and survivability, but Merk would have them too. We have the Ents, so they're the good faction's answer to the Trolls. We'll see what they can do when things get messy here on the front. And finally, the player who sent me the battle replay is going to be Lango. He's got some Dunedain Peacekeepers here who are taunting. Big fan of this unit. Axes, they should be really good at hacking and slashing their way through basic units. Armoured units, really heavily armoured units anyway, can be a little bit of a problem for them. But they are Dunedain after all, so they are going to be of higher quality than standard units. We've got some Arthedain Pikemen, several units of upgraded Evendim Spearmen by 1 level, Wardens of the North placing their stakes down there as well. We have got a lot of pikes, as you'd expect from Arthedain. Throughout the meta of Reforged, Arthedain have really fashioned themselves into one of the pike factions, because you always see them. We've got Arthedain Marksmen with the standard Arthedain pikes, and then the Anumanas Gate Guards as well with their morale boosting capabilities, which will be important. He's going up against Isengard after all, who are a fearsome foe. Dunedain Rangers here as well, so you can see that obviously a couple of units of Rangers are going to be on the field today for the defenders, the Dunedain and the Greenwood. Fornost Arraign Knights here, heavy swordsmen, heavily armoured as well, so nice to have a bit of extra damage. Standard Evendim Archers with the upgrade. Arthedain Marksmen without their upgrade. Arthedain Man-at-Arms are also here, I think. Yes, indeed, they don't have any armour upgrade, so they are going to be not as strong as the equivalent Urukai, but they're just here for support and to offer some muscle to the front line, Catapult and Evendim Archers. And that's all the composition, so without further ado, let's begin. So in a situation like this, where it's a 4v4, I actually sort of reverse my predictions under normal circumstances. I said this when I recorded it the last time as well, where actually I kind of start off with the defenders as having a slight edge in this sort of situation, because while the attackers, they will have individually higher quality armies, and if this were a flat open field they would have a significant advantage, but especially in a settlement like this, and especially with synergy like this, I must say. The Sylvan Elves blend very nicely with Western kingdoms like Arthedain and Gondor, because you have a really good mix of high armour, survivable units which are good workhorses for the front line and for skirmishing with the enemy, doing the grunt work, and then you have units like the Sylvan Elves, in particular stuff like the Woodland Protectors, higher quality archers. They offer the punch. So it's a good mix, I think. But it is interesting compositions. 2 units of horse archers in particular is interesting from Son of the Dunedain, who ironically is fighting alongside 2 of the Dunedain factions today, but is not actually playing as one himself. Moving some of the archers around, just getting ready for the position, so you can see that Nabest is moving forward. Probably one of the more numbers heavy armies on the field today. I think, has he got any Orc Fellas? I believe he does. Yes, we can see the Orc Fellas are here. A unit that can hide, which gives them a little bit of an edge over similar units. Cheap AP such as this is always useful as well, albeit he's going to be going up against a Lothlorien defence, so maybe not quite as much as it would be against... Well, actually no, Gondor is on this side as well, isn't he? But Lothlorien as well, so you do need to be careful. The AP will be useful regardless, but fragile units of course, because they're going to... Every faction on the field today is going to have to contend, at least to a certain extent, with Elven archers. Lothlorien and Merkwood are the 2 Elven factions which focus more on archery as well. So it's a scary thing. And there are of course contingency plans that you can go into when going through this settlement. There are the first layers of defence, which are scary to go through because there are several good positions you can put your archers. So Lothlorien Arthedain and Merkwood in particular, because Gondor don't really have much in the way of range today. They're sort of focusing more so on their front line. They've got a lot of good places they can go. Less so on the front, to be fair. The front is a little bit more difficult to actually position your archers well without wasting your ammunition a bit more. But once again, over here there are several good places you can put them as well. It's a little bit easier to put your archers either side of the choke point. It's a nice area up there, you can put them as well. But as the fight goes back, you can go into the courtyard, you can push up the hill here onto this little platform. There are two ways up. Once upon a time there was only one, and I remember there was a battle whose frame rate completely collapsed when it came to a battle around here. But another area, and it actually goes even further back as well. We haven't seen a battle so far previously on the channel that has gone all the way back to this position over here. It would be quite a desperate stand indeed. I mean, it is effectively one long choke point to the end here. I think as well you could position yourself inside here. It's a very small area, but potential there to fall back if needs be. For the time being though, the defenders can effectively at least try and hold the outer positions indefinitely. I think in a 4v4 that's more of a viable idea than it would be in a 3v4, especially a 3v5, where eventually if you just keep holding on to the same position you're going to get ground down if you allow that to happen. So you can see Proxima Centauri is going to be following eastern breeze in through the middle, so we're going to have two armies coming up through the middle choke point, which is the hardest one to defend, I believe. We're going to have Nabest moving up through this way, and he is going to attack from the western choke point over here, which in my opinion is probably the most awkward to attack because it's got the most immediate danger from archers potentially. And then Isengard is also going to move forward on their lonesome here on the eastern choke point, and they are going to be primarily facing off against Lango's Arthedain army. Arthedain, a very workmanlike front line as we have a look to see what Lango is crafting here. Standard pikes, standard Evendim spearmen, not a huge amount of quick damage on the front line here, but that doesn't necessarily need to be. They're good at holding the line. Evendim spears, among all of the western militia spears in particular, are the best for me. You can have a debate as to whether they're the best militia unit in the game, but the fact that you see them in pretty much every Arthedain composition I think speaks to their efficiency. Now they won't beat many Isengard units head up, but they don't need to of course. This is just to hold them in place. The main event for Arthedain on this occasion is going to be their archers. Their infantry is passable, Arthedain. It's good infantry if you're willing to spend money on it, but more often than not the damage is going to be done by either Arthedain's archers or their cavalry, and they haven't elected to bring any cav today. Which is a bit of a shame, I have to say. It could have been interesting to see what a unit of Knights of Illuminus or Royal Court of House Amlath could do in this situation. So you can see Tweak is moving forward, just getting his units into position ready to charge forward. Neither side wanting to go through things, and obviously this is a little bit of a grace period. I can't remember exactly when the battle starts, but it's not an overly long grace period, so I don't really feel like making a cut is all that necessary. But we can just say that maybe negotiations are underway. Maybe the Orc host is like, vacate the premises, leave the statue intact, and we'll let you go without too much trouble. Those are their demands. Naturally we can infer, based on the fact there is a battle going to take place today, that the defenders are not going to accept that. The Nazgul, Temple Executioner. So Mordor have got a few scary units, certainly. One thing that I would say about Mordor's army is that there's not a lot of shielded units. Uruk Captains are pretty much the only ones, which is bold in a situation like this, when you know you're going to be facing off against Elven archers. I would have been very tempted to bring even just some basic Moran on infantry. I suppose the Orc fodder are shielded, but I mean that is being quite kind to them, to be honest with you. I mean, if you were going up against a Silverthorn arrow, would you trust your life to a cut-out section of a keg? I didn't think so. Over on this side, meanwhile, Angmar in general are a faction which maybe are more built for this sort of thing. Not the Orc fellas, certainly, nor so the Pikes. Angmar Marauders are fairly basic in nature, but they can definitely be a bit of a tar pit. But what I'm really talking about is stuff like this, the Guardians of Kharn-Dûm, of course, and the Gundabad Guard. Good for this sort of thing as the Orcs shuffle their way towards the town. Angmar's banners fluttering in the breeze, tattered though they may be. Uruk Captains. Again, the armour piercing could be useful because you can see over here that Merkwood have shuffled their archers off. Some collaboration once again has happened over the text in game, I imagine. And Gondor has decided to go onto the front line. Definitely the better way to do things. The Gondor militia archers are built to skirmish like this, and they will happily trade back and forth with basic orc archers if they need to, save the ammunition of the more damaging and more fragile, to be honest, elven archers. To be fair, these are only militia archers, they do at least have a shield value. You don't want to be losing Wooden Realm Patrol or, heaven help you, Greenwood Rangers to basic orc arrows. These Wooden Realm Patrol can't actually hide because they're too close to the Mordor forces. Orc archers are also getting into position, so they're ready to skirmish. Mordor isn't going to be hanging about too long. Obviously not going to do a huge amount of damage, but there are 203 of them in the unit, so volume of fire is a thing which can have an impact. That is what you have to rely on as a faction like Mordor when it comes to your initial skirmishing anyway, as there's still some moving around inside the settlement there. Still waiting, Isengard poised to charge on in. As Angmar getting into position as well with Nabest, and you can see a front line made by Baconfish here of his light infantry, but he's definitely got his archers into a pretty scary position as well. Kindred of Caliborn, Lorinand archers, a lot of damage going to be poured into Angmar here. Angmar better than most among the evil factions, certainly, at withstanding range damage, but when you're talking about the Kindred of Caliborn, heads are going to roll regardless really of what you have, unless they try and shoot something like the Blackwatch Legion from the front, but few would take such a bargain. It is a fairly scary force. It's deceptive as well because a few units are going to be hidden in those trees that are either side of the road that lead up to the outpost itself. Like I said, it's a Black Numenorian settlement in style, and you can see that the Orc archers now are firing, so we're going to get underway immediately as the archers begin. Negotiations have broken down. Arrows starting to thud into the brave militia of Gondor as they sit up here, and they will also return fire. Meanwhile, we can see that the javelins of the Snaga skirmishers going to work. They're going to soften up the front line. The same is also true of the archers going into the Urukai Reavers, though, so Tweak is going to charge in with the Reavers. Fairly wide charge as well, so he's going to connect with a lot of the Evendim Spearman line there, and the charge did do a bit of damage. They will need support though pretty quickly, the Urukai Reavers. They are a fairly fragile shock infantry unit, and they're getting shot with arrows, so this assault will peter out pretty quickly, but the main damage dealer here is going to be the javelins, so the Snaga skirmishers doing their thing, Arthedain marksmen firing away, as are the Urukai archers down on the low ground, and the same is also going to be true over on this side. A big assault actually from Angmar here, as the Angmar Marauders and the Orc Fellas charge into the Elven lines. These two units alone, though, are not really the sort of thing which are going to make too much of an impact on the Blades of the Wood. They're exactly the kind of foe, to be honest, the Blades of the Wood are going to be good at dealing with. The AP isn't going to have too much of an impact on the grey-clad fighters from Lorien. And the Angmar Marauders are just not on the same sort of level as line infantry as they are. You can see there the Riders of the Golden Wood ballooning their shots over the line. They're going after something. They're going after the Scourge Raiders, a good choice, and there go the laser-like projectiles of the Kindred of Caliborn. Definitely the right choice, because the Blades of the Wood, a good target actually for the axe throwers because of their light armour. And now also Lorinand Axemen coming in here, so Lorinand Axemen will do a lot of damage, so Angmar going to need more on the front line here. Their reinforcements are kind of far away, but they can still get forward quickly enough here to reinforce the line should they need to. The Blackwatch Legion are here as well, and actually they're going to try and bulldoze through the line immediately. We'll come back there in just a second as the archers continue to fire in. You can see over here Orc Fodder starting to charge in after an initial phase of light skirmishing. Mordor are going to try and come in here, but it's with Orc Javelins and Orc Fodder, and you can see immediately the defenders smell blood in the water. Gondor Militia Infantry are going to sandwich them. A lot of the basic militia, this is the kind of foe they're going to really enjoy fighting. A lot of damage immediately done by the Wooden Realm Patrol as well. This is the problem. If you send forward units that are of too lower quality, doesn't matter how many of them there are, they're going to get dumpstered very, very quickly. And there they go, they're going to start filtering out very, very fast. Over here, though, you can see very, very nasty crossfire coming in from the Kindred and from the Riders of the Golden Wood, but the Blackwatch Legion are making it work. They are pushing back. And this is very nice. The Witchrealm Scourge Raiders are also firing in, doing a lot of damage, so Nabest is not... he's not having a too bad a time of it. I mean, he's taking a lot of losses, of course, and this will impact him eventually. But Baconfish is probably panicking a little bit here. I mean, the line is still sort of in shape, but I mean, Angmar are pushing in, and if more reinforcements are forthcoming, and they are, Angmar here are sending forward some trolls, they're sending forward Guardians of Kharndu, and the Witchram Hammer Guard, so they mean business here, and actually the trolls are going to come in here, do some damage to the Blades of the Wood. I like this because the Blades of the Wood are a good target for the trolls, and they're going to be backed up by Gundabad Guard. Very nice. So they're pushing in. They need to keep the reinforcements coming forward, though. They need to keep up the pressure on Lorien, because now that they've gone for this, tactic, Nabest, he needs to make it count. He needs to push in, and he needs to make Lorien pay for it, because he's on his own over here. He's not going to get much in the way of support. Meanwhile, similar story over here. Urukai infantry and pikes are now on the front line. Arthedain's front line is still unmoving, however, and there is still arrow fire coming in from both sides. Evendim archers firing in, of Arthedain marksmen over here, and Evendim actually ended up getting shot up pretty badly by the Urukai archers in the end. So while they are built for a skirmish fight, they are not immune to the damage that it will cause. Isengard will win this frontline fight without any sort of support, but you can see that they are still struggling a little bit, Isengard, because of the good positioning of Lango's skirmishers, but there's plenty more that came from. Tweak still has a few cards that he can play, and Arthedain have got Dunedain Peacekeepers on the front line, so at the very least they've forced him into committing one of his better units forward, as opposed to just allowing those lower quality units to do the business. Again, Morannon Halberds are coming in. This is where Mordor not having a lot of shielded units is really going to come back to bite them. Proxima Centauri has also come forward, which is good. He's going to be a little bit better in this sort of situation, but the crossfire they've got set up here is probably the best on the field, to be honest, between Gondor and Merkwood. Mostly Merkwood's doing, of course, because they've got most of the archers, but Gondor here really helping to beef out the front line. Pelagia Marines throwing their javelins in as well. Bit of a killing field so far. But it looks a little bit scarier than it is. It's mainly the ranged units that are the problem here, because on the front line it's mostly standard line infantry from both Gondor and from Mirkwood. Hiri Peng and Bows of Emondwyr, so they're keeping their cavalry inside the settlement first and foremost. A huge amount of trolls moving forward. I think they realise here they're going to need to be aggressive if they want to get the most out of this, to be honest with you. And yeah, trolls coming in. Trolls of Angmar, 17 of them. Javelins streaking into a blob of enemy infantry. Blackwatch Legion moving forward. A huge amount of damage being done, but they're pouring all of their ammunition in all at once here. Meanwhile, you can see here that Angmar have pushed Lorien back. Not all the way. The Blackwatch Legion got this far before ultimately being stopped dead in their tracks. The problem they have, though, if they weren't able to do this quickly, they were always going to end up getting shot in the back by the Kindred of Celeborn, and that's going to end up doing a lot of damage. As heavily armoured as the Guardians of Kharndu may be, it's going to be brutal for them. But the trolls are on the front line. I mean, Lorien are taking a lot of damage here as well, and they don't have as much manpower to play with as Angmar do. So they are taking damage quickly here, and it's really just a matter of who ends up breaking first. I mean, you can see here, Nabest has effectively thrown everything into this, which I do quite like, I admit. I don't think he's going to send his Witchers forward, because if they were to come forward they would instantly be vaporised by the Lorien archers, so he's going to send them around to another choke point, I think. Without the Witchers, to be honest, Lorien will probably be fine. The Karas Galadon's Guardians are on the front line now as well. The Trolls won't last forever. The Scourge Raiders have done a good job at doing damage. The Blackguard are on the way forward, but the numbers are fairly even at this point, and that means the quality of the Elves is probably going to start shining through, especially with that ranged support. But it's been really brutal, a really fast and furious fight there between the two factions. Temple Guard are now in here, pulling out their swords. It's definitely been a grisly uphill battle so far for Mordor and Angmar through the middle, and so far the defenders are having it their own way. Wardens of Amon Lank firing their arrows into the backs here. There's Uruk Captains and Trolls over there. I think the Nazgul are over here as well, actually. There's Temple Executioners, certainly. Infantry all over the place. There's Morannon Halberds. Need to be a little bit careful with those Horse Archers, because if they get in here there's a lot of spears and halberds from Mordor and Angmar. The Angmar Trolls are doing their thing. They'll actually do very nicely against Pelagia Marines, less so against the Axemen of Lasarnak that wait in behind. They'll be ideally placed for killing off Trolls. Speaking of which, the Olag High are moving forward now as well, so there's no let-up in that regard, but these Horse Archers are doing a good thing. Meanwhile, you can see here that Arthedain has already elected to start falling back. leaving a rear guard here to hold Isengard back for a little while. So Tweak, he committed his Guards of War, thankfully he committed more units, and he convinced Lango that it wasn't in his best interest to keep holding this choke point anymore. But Lango has got a backup plan. He's going to hold this position here and try and do the same as Lorien on the other side. You can see the Arthedain skirmishers are ready and waiting to shoot into the side of the Isengard line. So Isengard are going to have to go again. They're going to have to regroup their forces and try and smash through another position. But of course, if Angmar or Isengard from the two sides can get through, this massive front line defence from Merkwood and Gondor starts to become more of a problem actually, because they won't have anywhere to retreat to at that point, and it might become a little bit messy. Speaking of which though, you can still see down here fire arrows now being used on the Guardians of Khan Doom from the Loren archers to good effect as well, because it's causing them to break. And you can see more and more on the front line what the fate of Angmar is going to be over here. They are ultimately going to come out second best to the Lorien defence. But it's interesting, isn't it, because while the Angmar player here, Nabest, is ultimately going to be the one that ends up exiting the field first, Lorien aren't really looking all that clever themselves at this point. All of their infantry, really, aside from the Carascaladon's Guardians, who are in a good position to keep continuing, all of their infantry, dedicated infantry, is very depleted at this point. They still have their archers, out-of-ammo archers, which for elven factions, of course, is as good as having infantry. But Lorien are looking pretty haggard, but they are ultimately going to win. They're going to win fairly soon into the fight as well, which means, of course, they can then aid their allies in some way. How significant will that be? We can see, actually, we just missed a volley of fire from the Witchers. A devastating volley of fire from the Witchers as well. They came forward. And this is the problem. A lot of these elven archers were busy firing away at various targets. They're going to go after Nabest's Witchers here, and they are ultimately going to get themselves vaporised here. But even still, Nabest, he's been aggressive to the point of recklessness in this battle. But he pushed his Witchers forward, and they got a significant volley done. Like, they killed off a huge amount of Gondor's forces, but more significantly, they routed a huge amount of Gondor's defence as well, which obviously now there are trolls in behind the lines, and what was actually quite a comfortable position for the defenders now, thanks to Nabest's Witchers, or Witcher now as it is. He's trying to grill some of these Elders of the Elven King, and obviously now he has all of the ammunition from his unit available to him. A few more of Thranduil's. I mean, he's killing them individually, but it's better than doing nothing. The most decisive blow has already been struck. The elves actually trying to break out of this position as well, but the Bows of Amenduir immediately having that door slammed shut in their face by the Melkor's Chosen. Let's not forget as well that Proxima Centauri has his Witchers. Not a huge amount of reinforcements left from Mordor and Angmar at this point, in much the same way as Nabest. But over here, because of that Witcher volley, because of Gondor's crumbling in the middle of the defence, now their high quality units could still be a significant problem. You can see the Gundabad Guard continuing to push forward. The Trolls are up here. Woodland Protectors are a good foe for them to fight. The Ravenhelms less so, to be honest with you. The Ravenhelms, you don't want to be in there. There's Melkor's Chosen in here, trying to do some damage to the Mirkwood Horse Archers. There's still some Trolls. The Ents are moving in, so a clash of the Titans here. Halberds might not be the best target for the Ents, actually, but I mean, there's so few of them, they probably will break under the terrible blows of the tree. Witcher and Blackguard fighting on the front line as well, so high quality units left. Not a huge amount in terms of volume left for the attackers here in the middle. And unfortunately for them as well, Lorien are on their way across now to reinforce, so while they maybe could actually break through if it were just Gondor and Merkwood, with some Lorien assistance, that may not be the case. Isengard, meanwhile, taking their time a little bit more, but that's fine. Isengard, of course, are probably better at a slow push than any others. And I have to say, I quite like this from Tweak. He recognises the danger, and he knows he needs to be aggressive. He's got his Trolls in here. None of these units on the front line are particularly great against Trolls. Just basic Arthedain units, Avendim units, all of which are going to take a lot of damage, and they're all starting to break under the Trolls. And this is actually a bit of a problem for Lango, because he could shoot right along this line, but Isengard are bypassing this defence reasonably quickly. And he's going to be able to charge forward now. Urukai coming in behind the line, so it's good. It's good when a player recognises the danger and moves forward quickly. He has been trying to counter-skirmish. To be fair, though, Arthedain have actually seemingly singled out the crossbowmen as the main danger here. And they've been shooting into them more so than they've been shooting into stuff like the pikes and the infantry from the back. But of course, counter-skirmishing with the crossbows is always going to be slightly risky as well. Meanwhile, I think the Witchers, did they... No, the Witchers, I think they backed up. You can see there that Proxima Centauri's Witchers are there. But they're backing up because they see Lorien. Lorien probably still has a bit of ammo, but not that much. There are still Riders of the Golden Wood. And this is the problem, like, they used up a lot of their ammo here. They still have a few skirmishes. You can see there the Woodland Protectors have seen the Witchers, and they are able to kill off a few of them there from Proxima Centauri. The Melkor's Chosen are still there as well. But they used a lot of their ammo quite quickly, and that devastated the main lines of this Mordor Angmar push. But the Witchers are the great equaliser, and it's a good thing they're here actually, because otherwise this fight on this position, this choke point, could have been quite one-sided. But because of the gung-ho nature of the defenders in using their skirmishers, Merkwood in particular, the Witchers have had their time in the sun. And there's actually Arthedain shadow bows in here as well, shooting their ranger projectiles in. I think they're going after the Raven Helms, not the worst target, but their armour will make them a little bit of a challenging foe to face. Meanwhile, Ents are over here, but Uruk Captains, Temple Executioners, there are probably Nazgul over here as well somewhere. We shall see. Axe Throwers, so I mean, you know, the attackers are pushed through over here. Lorien over on this side have added their mites to the front line, which is substantial. Oh, and there was actually a Witcher volley there. You can see a huge patch of burning bodies. Is there going to be another volley from the Witchers? I think there probably is, isn't there? These Lorien Armed Archers are going to try and, yeah, absolutely grilled. You can see there is a huge amount. Another nice volley, this time from Proxima's Witchers. And this is the equaliser, because with Lothlorien's reinforcements arriving, they needed something to try and, you know, even the odds quickly, and the Witchers once again have provided that. Another nice volley from the Witchers there, killing off a ton of the Hiri Peng, routing them as well. Unfortunately for them though, I mean, they were already routing, but still more kills. The Ents have managed to find their way into the Arthedain shadow bows. This is their outpost they're trying to reclaim. There they are. Isengard have managed to push forward, and they're putting on the pressure. I mean, at this point, Isengard are the only ones with what can be considered a full army for the attackers at this stage. But here they are, really fighting the good fight on the front line. The question is, will they have enough? I think they do actually have enough to kill off Arthedain. The question is whether or not they're going to be facing reinforcements from the other armies or not. The crossbows have also taken a bit of a beating, continuing to take a beating from the Arthedain marksmen and now from the artillery. The Lurtz hunting pack trying to utilise their body-piercing projectiles, but they are obviously one of the main sources of, well, one of the main attracting factors for those Arthedain missiles as well. Wardens of the North are going to be able to kill them off pretty quickly as well, but the infantry for Isengard is still in good shape actually. Lots of Urukai infantry, lots of Urukai pikemen, guards of Orthanc. I think the Berserkers have mostly petered out at this point. They've been fighting on the front line for a little while. In all of these choke point battles, so that's fair enough. I think at this point the Witchers have been killed. There's a Temple Guard that are retreating, but you can see here the arrival of Lothlorien. I think now, sensing the fact that the Witchers are gone, you can see that what remains of Angmar and Mordor on this front are starting to fall apart. The arrival of Lothlorien really the catalyst there for the defenders being able to hold on. There's still Elders of the Elven King. Still a very depleted unit of Lorien Armed Warriors back there. Riders of the Golden Woods, they're going to be able to sweep forwards. Of course, the attackers were pushing this way, so they do still have actually a few units that I think were trying to make it over to help out Isengard, so they still have a few here. Witchround Blackguard, Temple Executioners, really all of the finest units that Angmar and Mordor had at their disposal. Still here, the Melkor's Chosen are in behind the lines as well. They charge in there to the Arthedain marksmen, that's going to do a pretty hefty amount of damage to them. But now, what have we got here? Ebendim Archers shooting in from the side. Still catapult fire coming in. They're trying to push through the side here with their Urukai Archers, trying to overrun this front line. Nimlothians coming in. Gondor desperately trying to help Arthedain hold on to this front line as Isengard continues to push forward. There's a certain inevitability about all of this because of all of the pikes that are there. Temple Executioners making their way across as well. Melkor's Chosen going to try and charge into the back, but the Nimlothians do see it. They do manage to turn around. So it's not going to be quite as devastating as it could have been. And the Melkor's Chosen need to get out of there really, otherwise the Nimlothians are going to, well, they're going to do that. They're going to kill the Melkor's Chosen very, very quickly. Nimlothians are one of the worst units you can get caught in melee with if you're a cavalry unit. As we just saw, the Melkor's Chosen are no joke, but such is the way of things. Melkor's Chosen charging in now to the Riders of the Golden Wood. the numbers being what they are, the Melkor's Chosen might actually lose that fight. Fully healthy, both of them, the Melkors probably win it, but Arthedain Marksman coming in. Lorenan Swordmasters are in here as well, but the Witchrealm Blackguard really fighting very, very hard. I think at this point, though, the numbers are just against them, especially with all of these Sylvan Elves bearing down on them. Swordmasters, dedicated infantry, Elders of the Elven King are fighting over here against something. I think probably the remnants of the Ranger unit. There's actually some Scourge Raiders, but they're cleaning things up over here. You can actually see over here as well the Witchrealm Pikemen are sort of reforming, trying to come back into the battle, but that's not going to happen. The Kindred of Caliborn are not going to allow them to do that, pulling out their twin blades, and they should be able to carve through them. Get in behind them with the Lorenan Axemen, and they will start routing once more. There will be no reforming allowed. There's still Carascaladon's Guardians as well. Still a few Troll Drummers. They're maybe a little bit too far away from proceedings, actually. They maybe should have been in and amongst things sooner. That maybe would have helped things out a little bit. But yes, you can see now, Lorien pushing forward. There's Dunedain Rangers over here. There goes the Gondor General, though. The forward momentum of the Urukai continues. Their army is looking a little bit thin on the ground now, but so too are all the enemies. And like I said, they've got a lot of pikes. They do still have the support of some elite infantry units as well, including 11 Nazgul over here. So you can say that for Eastern Breeze's army, like he's managed to save some individual units which will really help Isengard here if they are able to, but this could be a devastating blow. Dunedain Rangers firing in from the side. Tweak needs to find some way of stopping those Dunedain Rangers from firing in, because his main hope for winning this fight at this point, the odds may be against him, but he needs to rely on his pikemen to form up a nice front line. He needs to be able to get into them, he needs to be able to stop them from firing. And there goes Mordor's general. Actually, that was Angmar's general, wasn't it? Proxima's general falls. Lorenan warriors charging into the Urukai infantry, and this is a problem as well. AP, very useful against Isengard. The Melkor's Chosen flattening this unit of Evendim archers, but what they really need to be doing is charging over here and dealing with the Dunedain. Those Warns of the North are actually very depleted at this point. I wonder if they charged into something they had no business being in melee with, because at this point they would definitely lose to the Melkor's Chosen. Maybe not if the Warns of the North give them a bit of support. And now the Melkor's Chosen turn around and they start going after the Dunedain Rangers. That should get their attention, temporarily at the very least, and actually now the Arthedain units have closed off the most immediate pressure point, shall we say. The Numinas Gate Guards are here, the catapult trying to bank shots over the buildings, over the domes. Again, like, look at that though, Nazkai getting shot up badly by the Dunedain Rangers, so he still had his Nazkai in reserve. They're moving forward now, but already they've taken a Ranger volley, a second Ranger volley as well, unshielded as they are as well. They're well armoured, unlike the Berserkers, but it's not the sort of fight you want to be taking. Finally, the Witchrealm Blackguard are gone. The Nazgul are still getting in here, trying to prevent yet more Lorien reinforcements, which has been the story of the battle. Remember I said that Lorien didn't win their battle by a huge amount over against Angmar. It was very costly for them, but they won it quickly. And that was as a result of the attackers' choice, really. Lorien won it quickly, and as a result, they have been able to consistently reinforce their allies where they were most needed. If Lorien weren't here when the devastating Witcher volleys hit on the front line, Angmar and Mordor could have actually won. They could have supported Isengard, and then Isengard and Mordor and what was left of Angmar would already be swarming towards the settlements, and they would have already been forced back. But as it is, Lorien have been able to reinforce their allies one by one, and that's been a problem for them, because it means that while Isengard would have beaten Arthedain if they were on their own, the victory would have come much slower than Lorien's on the other side. It was kind of a dead heat in the middle, I would say. Slightly favouring the defenders, perhaps. But without Lorien's reinforcements, we'll never know if the Witcher volleys would have been enough to turn things around. But a Lorien victory quick on this side, an Isengard victory slower on this side, it would have been. But Arthedain ultimately has done what they needed to do. They've held on long enough. And now Isengard are starting to run low on manpower. Their Urukai infantry is fleeing, their pikes are fleeing. They're very depleted at this point though. They've got pikes here in and amongst the Nazkai who are doing their best, and to be fair, they are up close and personal with the Carascaladon's Guardians, which is probably the best bet for trying to kill them off, to be honest with you. And over here, still the Nazgul fight. There's only 6 of them they are going up against. the mighty elders of the Elven King, so they are almost certainly not long for this world. Woodland Protectors firing some javelins in. The Troll Drummers commit themselves now as well, so that's something at least, but it's not going to be enough to get the attackers, I should say, back into this. The defenders at this point in the ascendancy, and the attackers simply have nothing left to give, to be honest with you. Just trying to take a quick look around to make sure there's nothing else. Is there something over here? There is actually. The guards of Orthanc went right around the settlement, interestingly enough. What's left of Gondor? I mean, Gondor at this point are completely gone as defenders. All of their units have routed, their general is gone. They got grilled hardest by the Witches, I would say. Even though both Lorien and Mirkwood also felt that bitter sorcery. But they still have some guards of Orthanc, 28 of them. They could have made a difference on the front line, to be honest, but again, that's not going to be enough. They just aren't damaging enough to really come in from behind and sweep the enemy away. There's still ranger ammunition as well as they continue to kill off the crossbows. The crossbows have been depleted for a while. They've been constantly under arrow fire from Arthedain up on the hill, and catapult fire, of course. There's an Ent in there now, but the crossbows have also been constantly firing. They have been facilitating Isengard's advance. They got through 2 choke points fairly well, actually, Isengard, but a third was just too much for them, because by the time they got to the 3rd choke point, they weren't just facing down men of Arnor, they were facing down Gondorians, and then, of course, the real kicker were the Sylvan Elves. What have we got there? The Lurtz hunting pack rout. The Nazkai are all dead at this point. The Troll Drummers are there, still banging away on their drums, trying to have a positive viewpoint of the situation. There's still a Nazgul in there as well, but he's getting passed around by Elders of the Elven King. Actually, there's 3 Nazguls still alive. So that's fairly substantial, but again, they're up against one of the stronger Merkwood units. No Palace Guard on the field today, which is interesting, but like I said, I think there was a bit of collaboration in the composition picks, because Gondor went fully in for infantry, Mirkwood going more so in for the skirmishers, and in the end that synergy worked out very well. If not for the Witches, they would have been utterly dominant on that front line, I think. Would Mirkwood and Gondor have been? But as it was, the Witches were the great equaliser, and thank goodness for the Witches, to be honest with you. The Troll Drummers proving that they are not frontline trolls, as they very quickly find themselves butchered. But yeah, the Witches actually made this fight very, very even, because there's not much of the defenders left at all, to be honest with you. In many ways, Lorien are the only ones with anything substantial left. There's 42-ish Elders of the Elven King. These Dunedain Rangers and the Wardens of the North and the Catapult Crew are the only thing Arthedain have, and of course Gondor are not here at all. So it has been a brutal, brutal fight, but the Guards of Orthanc are going to find themselves outclassed by the Wardens of the North. Those mighty Númenorian longswords, making their ancestors proud by taking the enemy head on, using their superior might. Yeah, and there goes Tweak's army. I thought Tweak did very well actually as Isengard. He did things exactly as Isengard liked to, pushing forward, dominating the melee fight with their pikes, heavy infantry, and then mixing in a few things like berserkers, supporting it with crossbows. And in the end, I do believe he would have been victorious against Lango's Arthedain force had reinforcements not arrived. But like I said, the difference really, even though I think Nabest's Angmar army actually did quite a lot of damage over here to Lothlorien. You can see there are a fair few elven corpses, especially over here. That Blades of the Woodline was actually run over pretty easily by Angmar. In the end though, the brutal skirmishing positions up here on the ledge, the Kindred of Caliborn, the Lorenand archers, were able to do too much damage to Angmar too quickly, and in spite of doing a decent amount of damage to his army, ultimately Lorien were victorious quickly enough that they were then able to make the difference on the other fronts. Like I said, the Witcher volleys could have turned things around for Mordor and Angmar over here, and Mirkwood and Gondor could have fallen apart. Gondor, in fact, did eventually fall apart anyway. But Lorien's arrival meant that the bulk of their army was killed. Only a few elite units managed to get over here, and even then they didn't get all the way over to Isengard to help them, which is unfortunate for them. And then, of course, Isengard, who were working away on Arthedain, ultimately ended up losing when Lorien and Mirkwood arrived. To be fair as well, Lango, the real moment where the fight was put beyond the attackers, I think, was where Lango put his Dunedain Rangers over here. Tweak had nothing that he could use to respond to it, and he shot right through the blob, killed off far too many of the pikes for it to be tenable any longer, because those pikes were the things which could still have made the difference even late into the game. But it was not to be today. The Nazgul continue to fight hard. All of these frames apparently are still just due to the Nazgul. There's a few units running around back here. What is this? This is the Wardens of the North, is it not? Yep. One of the few Arthedain units still alive. Them, the Dunedain Rangers, the Catapult crew. But it is mostly Lorien, and I say mostly Lorien, I mean it's not much, is it? If we have a look here, yeah, 4% the difference. Any one thing could have made the difference here. And it wasn't an immaculate performance by the defenders either. Like I said, I think they went a bit too all in with their archers right from the start. And the Witchers nearly made them pay for that, they really did. But in the end, they were just about able to weather the storm. And the Arthedain outpost will not fall back into Sauron's hands. And we can surmise that this statue is going to be removed, replaced with something maybe a little more tasteful. Maybe a nice elven fountain here in the middle. I wonder where the location of this would be. On the coast, south of Dol in between Dol Amroth and Umbar, perhaps? It's a long way for all of these factions to travel, especially Arthedain. But I suppose needs must, and it is going to be a good victory here. A nice theme as well. Fan favourite Merkwood were here. We got to see some good performances. I don't think anyone played particularly badly. I think the Gondorian player and Nabest, the Angmar player who attacked the western side of the settlement, were obviously the whipping boys for both of their respective teams, but it wasn't as if they played poorly. There go the Nazgul finally. But like I said, it wasn't as if they played particularly poorly, it was just that the situation was such that they were taken advantage of by the other team. Nabest by Lorien's archers, really doing a lot of damage to him very, very quickly. He kind of made up for that with his Witchers though, because the Witchers were what really did Gondor in. The vast bulk of their army routed in the face of that devastating volley that we saw the aftermath of by Nabest's Witchers actually. And then obviously Proxima Centauri also did the same with Lothlorien and Merkwood to a certain extent, albeit just a depleted unit of Hiri Peng, but still a lot of damage done to them with the Witchers, which could have made the difference, but in the end wasn't quite enough on that front line. And Tweak, he played very well as Isengard. Like I said, I've maintained throughout this fight that if the reinforcements did not arrive to help Lango, I think Isengard would have reigned supreme on that side. However, also to give Lango some credit, like I said, the thing that really was the final nail in the coffin were those Dunedain Rangers in the side, getting a few really nice volleys into the pikes and into the Nazkai, which were really the last card that the attackers had to play. And in the end, they were blunted quite significantly by that. And there was no way the Guards of Orthanc were going to... Only 28 Guards of Orthanc were going to flank around and be the heroes. They're just not a damaging enough unit to be that showstopper, that unit that turns everything around. But no one played particularly badly here. And like I said, Lorien winning quickly with the difference here. Baconfish 302 was probably panicking a little bit at one point actually when Angmar really started coming forward and actually pushing him back, but his archers made him able to weather that storm, and then he was able to reinforce. He was able to come over here, as battered as his army was at that point. He was healthy enough to make the difference on the front line and to force Angmar and Mordor back, and he was then also healthy enough, along with the remnants of Gondor and Merkwood here in the middle, to come over here and ensure that Tweak couldn't win the game for his team with Isengard. And that was the difference, I think. So yeah, good to see some names. I haven't seen Son of the Dunedain or Baconfish 302 in a little while, actually, so it's good to see them. And Proxima Centauri as well, actually. So yeah, good to see some familiar faces. And big thank you to Langer for sending me this battle replay. So we'll have a look and see what got the kills for him. And I think rather unsurprisingly, it's actually his archers, even his regular archers, that ended up doing the business for him. His Arthedain marksmen, his Evendim archers, getting 280 kills on a unit of Evendim archers is fantastic value. Obviously they were shooting in without any real response from Isengard because they were focused on trying to smash through the choke points, which they did, to be fair. The Evendim spears, one of them did okay, but the others were sort of vanquished very, very easily. The Arthedain pikemen weren't actually all that impressive on this occasion, and I suppose that goes to show that Isengard pikemen are superior. The Illuminus Gate Guards did significantly better, though, to be fair to them, with 185 kills, which is what you'd expect from a higher quality pike unit, of course. Nice morale battery as well. And like I said, Dunedain Rangers, like the catapult was kind of much for muchness, really. It helped, but I think it was more of a psychological thing than anything else in this battle. Dunedain Rangers utilised late on the final blow, which really put it beyond the attackers. No way back into the game for them following on from that, I don't think. But a good performance all round. I think Arthedain's units here performing as you would want them to. The archers, the thing that performed above average perhaps, and the pikes slightly below so. But yeah, like I said, big thank you to Lango for sending this one to me. It's the second time that I've seen it, and it was just as good on the second watching, only 4% the differential, nice themed battle as well, all the things that people like to see. But yes, moving forward, I mean, to give some perspective here, I'm actually recording this toward the tail end of September, and this replay is likely to come out and be published on the channel at the tail end of October, so it goes to show how far in advance I've actually recorded at this point. And I do still have a replay that I have now from Stu, who I'm going to, which is, I think it's a themed battle on Umbar, which will probably be the next battle that I do. So whenever this comes out exactly, the next battle that follows on from this will be a themed Umbar battle, I think, between Umbar on the defence and Gondor on the attack, I believe it is. So that should be quite fun as well. But other than that, like I said, I'm trying to sort of do my backlog as it comes now, which, even though the downside to doing it this way is the battles that I use, unless it's like on a brand new map that's like sort of really sort of exciting and no one's seen it before and it's like a really well-known thing in Middle-earth, like the Gondolin siege, where then I will push it towards the front of the queue basically. But for the most part, the battles that I do now, I'll record them and then it'll be like 3 or 4 weeks before they actually get seen, which is the downside to doing it. But the upside to doing it this way, I've noticed, is that I'm actually far more likely to use all of the replays that I get because I'm recording them in bulk if need be, but also as and when they come now, because I've actually caught up on my backlog at long last with a bit of organisation. It was bound to happen sooner or later, I suppose. But this means that if you send me a replay, as long as it's not like a 1v1 that's 3,000 frames on the grassy plain, chances are I will actually be able to use it, as long as it's not a map that I've done like super recently. For example, there was Tolfalas duplicates that I got sent, so I was only able to use one of them. But I'm able to use more of the maps now, so chances are I'm much less likely now to actually miss a battle replay than I was before, which I think is worth the trade-off of there being a little bit of lag before people actually see their content put up on the channel. So I hope that's an acceptable trade-off for people, but by the time this replay comes out, do let me know. There should also be a channel update that I've already done at this point, which will probably explain in detail what I'm going to be doing. The schedule will remain the same in terms of size of the content. There'll be 2 pre-records a week and 2 streams a week. That is still going to be the plan moving forward. There may be the odd week where I can't do that, and the channel update will be the thing which really sort of explains that in a bit more detail and how and when that's likely to happen. Because I imagine what's going to happen university-wise for me in this term is going to be 3 or 4 weeks perhaps of like solid, really focused on university work, and all of the other weeks are slightly lighter, where I just go in and I can maintain my channel schedule relatively easily because I can sort of fit my university work as and when I need to. But those weeks where I have to sort of go hard on it are going to be when I have like time booked out, which of course you need to do because of all the restrictions with social distancing and so on at the moment. So that's going to be the situation, which is also why I've been recording in advance, because it means I'm well prepared for those weeks where I may not be able to do any streaming. It means I can replace the streams that I would have done with pre-records instead. So there's always going to be the same amount of content per week. I just want to be a little bit flexible, obviously, with how and when I can do what I can do. So yeah, there'll probably already be a channel update explaining that in more detail, to be honest with you, so this is probably just me repeating myself, but who knows? We never know when that I don't know when that channel update video is exactly coming out, and I don't know exactly when this video is coming out either, so there's a certain amount of variation there. But yeah, hopefully, as I move towards shutting the recording down, hopefully this time NVIDIA will actually allow me to do so, and won't shit the bed again, so to speak. But yeah, once again, big thank you to Lango, big thank you to all the players. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.